Percent of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
Gets the people going.
You are now listening to Diagnonsense.
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
With Kurt Honeck.
Damn it.
And Isaac Smoldon.
I am also here. Who am I for the purpose of this podcast?
John Galt.
Or John Locke.
Yeah, one John Locke. That's good.
You can be, that's his gamer tag. He's John Locke on all of his, and on the back of his softball uniform.
That's funny.
He's John Locke.
I'm trying not to make a lot of noise with this chocolate.
Yeah, but you're not doing a very good job at it.
Russell.
Yeah, there we go.
And Kurt's got to get his chocolate in for the day.
That's good.
85% cocoa.
I had a little bit earlier.
I just had my tacos. Just had my lunch. Feeling good. Okay. You want to just get started? Okay. While you chew your chocolate? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Diagnonsense. I'm Isaac Smoldon. As always, we've got Kurt Honeck here. Kurt, have you chewed and swallowed yet? Are you able to say hello?
Got my chocolate in.
Kurt had a little vacation for a couple weeks.
I did.
Are you feeling refreshed?
Yeah. Yes, because human services, it's like when I play an instrument, right? It's like you practice something a lot and you're doing it sloppy. Then you come back and you're like doing it really well. And you're like, wow, my brain remembered this. So human services can be like that, where you're engaging people with behavioral theory and like different techniques. And then you come back and you pick it up and you're like, wow, I didn't know I knew how to play guitar. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like,
so you're calling our clients a guitar is what
well,
you're saying?
Well, it's like any skill.
Okay, let's move on.
It's like any skill, you know.
We are joined today by economist, concerned community member, my dad, Todd Smoldon. How's it going, Dad? Todd? We'll probably go Todd.
Yeah, you can call me Todd.
Yeah, just for this. Occasionally when we've done sports broadcasts together, I've gone Todd. It's a little weird, but
actually,
I'll get over it.
At your age, there isn't anything I can do to you if I don't like what you call me anyway. Yeah. So, but I just actually what Kurt said, I that was really interesting, because I was a teacher for 24 years before doing what I do now, and you're right. When you work with people, and spoiler alert, like teachers have lots of tricks that they do, and because they have different students, over the course of semesters and things like that, you got this bag of tricks, and you pull them out on different people, and sometimes they work better on some than others. But I understand what you're saying, which is it can be very exhausting working with people. Yeah. And that sometimes can get you into a rut. So taking a break
it's like a rut,
great thing to do.
Yeah, where it's like you want to do the easy thing. You don't want to learn, like you don't want to necessarily do the advanced technique. But but then you come back to it and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we do X, Y, and Z because it helps the client exercise their own psychological situation better.
Yeah, and when you're pushing yourself, you're also pushing others, and you're discovering new ways to be successful with what you do.
Pushing yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of related to, I think,
things.
what this conversation is going to be about in some ways.
It's a really great segue into our topic. And that's because our topic is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, which is it's a book. I didn't read spoiler alert, I didn't read the books. I watched the movies, which are on YouTube for free. You can also watch them. They get progressively worse. There's 3 of them. It starts out, the production quality is okay. By the 3rd one, they're just exposition dumping on you because they didn't have time to finish all the plot points. So
to be fair, my dad reads a lot of books, and he said he started it and it was a lot, and he did not
so
finish it.
So the book isn't much better.
Yeah, to be fair.
The themes of the book are what we're talking about. I can't speak for actually reading the book or necessarily recommend the movies as pieces of cinema. The actors change every time. it's a little hard to keep track. They have to keep reintroducing characters because you're like
You
don't
almost
know
have
who's
to.
who.
What I did was I was playing Minecraft and I binged it and I was like watching it and like listening because you almost have to watch it consecutively in order to like because the characters change and the series and the film. But
Yes, it had been a while since. Well, I believe I read the book. But at my age, it's sometimes I forget. Like, did I actually read that book, or should I? Was it on my to read list?
Right.
But I watched the movies again.
I think you had me watch the movies when I was a kid too.
That sounds like me.
But I don't think we're necessarily advocating for all of Ayn Rand's philosophy. She's a very interesting literary character in history. But there's some good stuff in there. There's some interesting stuff in there. There's some bad stuff in there, and there's some schlock in there because Ayn Rand is a deeply flawed human being, as are we all. But certainly an interesting writer and an interesting, I guess you could call her somewhat of a quasi philosopher.
no, I think
In
she's
a way.
regarded as an economic philosophy.
Economic philosopher.
Right.
Actually, did you know that my economics degree coming out? But actually, before economics was called economics, it was actually philosophy. It was part of the philosophy area of study.
Well, I mean, that makes sense to me because psychology really emerged out of theology, right? So, I mean, you kind of have this secular kind of like stuff starts to kind of get more dispersed and more complex. Yeah.
Well, and now it's gone full circle too, because now you have the fields of behavioral economics as well.
Yeah,
So economics started as philosophy, and then it became economics, and now it's circled back to being quasi-philosophy. Or maybe it always was quasi-philosophy. I mean, economics is the study of people's and individuals' decisions in the face of scarcity.
Yeah. So yeah, it really is the study of how human beings make choices and based on the reality of scarcity. And I think it fascinated me because I didn't have to learn parts of the brain. So I could just I could take the easy way out and just kind of look around in my natural world and say, oh yeah, no, that makes perfect sense why that that person would make that particular choice based on costs and benefits. So
yeah. Would we consider? And I definitely want to get into the plot of the movies as and the book obviously as briefly as possible, even though it is going to be a little hard to sum it up in comprehensible amount of time. But would we consider Ayn Rand a libertarian of sorts?
I would. Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
I think in it's been a while. I was kind of fascinated with her, but it's been several years since I kind of looked at her story. But I believe she grew up in the USSR.
Or was it East Germany?
I think it was under communism.
Yeah.
I'm going to defer to Kurt.
Yeah, it was under communism. I'll have to look it up now. I bet you I can find it in a second here. But I think she grew up under communism, and what the deal was that she saw that and she moved to the U.S. and really was inspired by the United States and wanted to, she kind of developed her own philosophy because she felt like she didn't have that capability to have that self-actualization under communism. And so she really wanted to explore that and expand that and kind of had an idea about how it could be furthered, even further, we could explore, economics and individualism even further. Because I think she was familiar with the horrors of the wars and understood how communism came about, but didn't agree with the outcome of it.
Well, and the book certainly speaks to the dangers of. So it's obvious that she's trying to get you to look at the dangers of socialism, and maybe not even necessarily socialism, but the dangers of centralized power in a government making decisions for the masses and the suffering that causes, because even it's not really it's not the communist states of America or anything like that. It's not that version of alternate history, but it is a country that by the end is, it's doing stuff that we've seen in Soviet Russia or Nazi Germany or, name any fascist dictatorship over the last, any year of human history. And the number of people that make decisions is smaller and smaller and smaller. And through the course of the book, the number of competent people in the system also becomes essentially nothing by the end. So it definitely speaks of the danger of that. I think there is an element, though, of looking at what happens to the people. And the movie tries to, and again, I haven't read the book. I've only watched the movie. The third movie is bad. It's a bad movie. So I struggle to tell, okay, is this what the book is actually saying, or is this just because the movie is bad? But they try to leave you with a hopeful message. And really it seems like the movie is as much about the dangers of like a pure form of Randian libertarianism where everyone is only a selfish actor for themselves with no regards to any other human being. And there can be dangers in that too. I mean, yes, your main characters who are turned on by subway workers doing their jobs. We'll get to that, Kurt. I know that's your favorite part. But these couple thousand individuals are all happy and fine in their little community, and meanwhile the rest of the world is just burning down and people are dying in the streets. And I don't think that that's what we should quite strive for either. And I think her argument in the book was, or the argument of John Galt, who is he? We'll get to that.
Who is John Galt?
Who is John Galt? but his argument was just that, the system's all screwy and there's no hope, so we're just going to let everyone take themselves out and then rise from the ashes of this fallen society. So it
seemed a little selfish.
Well, yeah, they're totally
from
selfish.
your interpretation.
I mean,
yeah,
and
they're self-interested.
They're self-interested.
This is just to step back a little bit in economic history and philosophy. So this was the argument of Adam Smith in the Theory of Moral Sentiments, and then also in The Wealth of Nations, was that there's a difference between being selfish and self-interested, although an economist could argue it doesn't matter whether someone's selfish or self-interested. If they are engaging in economic activity, they are going to have to make, without government intervention, they will have to make others better off in order for themselves to be better off. Adam Smith had a famous quote, it's not for the benevolence of the brewer, the butcher, or the baker that they sell their wares, but out of their own self-interest. So in other words, it's not because I care about you that I make you bread, but when I make you bread, you give me more money than the bread is worth, and I have largesse that I can then use for something else. So that is the fundamental, I guess, argument of how self-interest drives wealth creation in an economic system. And I think that one of the things I think that bothers me a little bit is the term libertarian has come to mean anarchist and libertarian to some people, and libertarianism is not anarchy. It is just the freedom to interact, with others.
I think Josh Freifogels kind of talked about that a little bit. Just because you have the liberty to rebel does not mean that you are not like it doesn't force you to rebel, especially not in a nihilistic way necessarily.
Most of the time it's against your self-interest to rebel, actually, unless things are so
severely,
things are so bad that a large enough percentage of the population will have more benefits than costs for rebelling.
Yeah. And now we're getting into behavioral economics as well. And I think that I don't don't disagree with the message because it is, if you study, or look into any economic research, like people, and unless you're looking at people that are not rational actors, then yes, everyone makes decisions that are in their own self-interest, at least economically, even if someone donated all their money to some organization, let's say my house. No.
Yes, why not?
myhousematsu.org. But even if someone donated all their money there, if the Udals, I know that you love Udals.
Satisfaction.
Mom doesn't love Udals, but Udals is defined as a unit of satisfaction. So if the units of satisfaction that you get from donating all of your money to an organization is more than the units of satisfaction that you'd get by, spending it on anything else, by the next best alternative, then you've made a rational economic decision, even if physically on this world your net worth has not increased. And that, I guess that is the element that I felt like Rand kind of lost in this book, or if she had it in the book, it definitely didn't come across in the movies. And as people that are in the social services industry, I think we see a lot of people that act in other, a lot of staff members here, a lot of community partners that act in other people's best interests that still makes them an economic actor. There's the famous phrase that's over the power generator door, and I feel like maybe again we should be going through the plot, but it's, I swear by my life and my love of it that I will never serve another man or let another man do the same for me.
I actually took a photo of that sign while I was watching the movies because I wanted to bring that up. I'm very disturbed. That actually disturbs me a lot.
That
as a
idea?
human being,
Right?
Because I agree with you. I think the approach that she took in the book and in the movies, of course,
and in her personal life too,
right, was non-charitable. It was almost an overreaction to compelled charity,
right?
And I get it.
Well,
but
that makes sense to me though, coming from, I believe she grew up in communism, and then I don't know if she immigrated or was like a refugee. Like, I'm not sure. I can't remember her full story, but that seems like a rational reaction to the forced compelled giving that she felt like she was living under,
right? Where
she fled from. And I wish I remembered the exact country that was, but that makes sense to me. I mean, and I see that element in the films as well. And it reminds me of, because I watched interviews with her, and she has said that
she's not a very nice person.
Well, I don't know if it's.
Have you ever watched it?
It's almost like compassion burnout.
Yeah,
that's what it reminds me of. What people call compassion burnout, because I mean, she's altruism. She talks about altruism being like, post World War II, altruism has killed millions of people. And she has a rational kind of philosophy in terms of like a response to the fact that all these people went to war for other people and other ideas besides themselves. So that individualism, I can see where that's coming as a rational response to the millions of dead from the world wars. Yeah. And so I see where she's grasping for, even though it I think, especially to the Western world, it can look very callous.
Well, and she's a product of her environment, but I feel like we talk about Maslow's hierarchy a lot here in our men's and women's empowerment classes, and you have kind of those base needs of food, water, and shelter, and then, kind of working your way up, you need companionship, and then you need love. But at the top of that pyramid is self-actualization and empathy. And from the interviews that I've seen with her and from the perspective of this book, it feels like the heroes of this book are a bunch of individuals that made it up to they were right up to the top rung of Maslow's pyramid, and then they just set up camp there. They set up base camp there and never tried to get higher. They missed empathy. They missed self-actualization. And I didn't I remember watching it as a kid, and I didn't really think about I didn't think all the way through the implications of that phrase. But when I did rewatch it, I had the same reaction as you, I think, Todd, where it didn't sit right with me. And up to that point, it's pretty easy to root against the villains. You're following a couple of individuals. You're following, it's Daphne, right? Taggart Transcontinental. Gas is so expensive that the only reliable form of transportation is trains, and gas is like $50 a gallon. And then
selling on the black market if you can get it.
Yep, and piracy is rampant, and no one will work in this town anymore, and they took our gerbs,
and this is all the result of price controls because the government. And this is actually something I battled a lot when I was teaching economics in high school, which is that people who are not really understand economics very well think that the government can just set prices for things and that solves all the problems in the world. But that's because they're only thinking like consumers and they're not thinking like producers. And producers don't produce at low prices because it costs them money to make things. But yeah, sorry for the interruption, but that's.
Well, but I think that this is where I think economically, this is where the movie has a lot of credence is you kind of watch the country dissolve because there's all this over regulation just related to they don't want anyone to have a monopoly, and the government wants everyone to be fair and equal, but by trying to level the playing field. And this Kurt is where I think you really see her anti-communist economic theory
well,
and push through is
you could almost say. I think she. I wish I would have had a thing pulled up for her because I think she was. Wikipedia.
This is a podcast, so
I know.
We can edit
I know. We can just
edit it out.
We can just look it up.
Or
I could leave it in here so that everyone knows that
we can
Kurt
actually
had to-
take 5 minutes just to take a break, Kurt.
Yeah.
And you can look it up.
That's true.
and nobody will ever know.
No one will know unless I leave it in.
Britannica, which I don't know.
Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah, Encyclopedia Britannica. Says was born in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Okay.
In 1905.
So Kurt was right about that.
And then this was when the Tsarist regime was overthrown in Russian Revolution in 1917.
Right.
Yeah, right.
We all know that. And then her family moved to Crimea, where she finished high school, and then returned to Russia in 1921, and then moved to the United States in 26. And so she would have felt the effects of the First World War, and I don't know if she did most of her advocacy after the Second World War, or if that was so. I may be wrong about post World War II, but World War I was any of the wars were catastrophic enough to propel people to think.
Right, because you have the fight against nationalism, and then also in the early days of communist Russia, you have everything, all of the, and this then, like in the plot as well, this is what happens is all of the producers are eventually taken over by the government so that they can force them to produce this or that they need. And meanwhile, while this is all happening, all of the leading CEOs and scientists and professors are all disappearing. Yeah. And also everyone's asking the question, who is John Galt? which in the movie, it's like asking who is John Galt is essentially saying like, it is what it is. Like, why are you asking questions that no one knows the answer to? I don't know who John Galt is. So why are you asking me why gas is $50 a gallon? Who cares what the answer is?
And that might be, that was probably one of the most disturbing things to me was that because essentially what you had is a small group of elites who controlled everything, and everybody else felt hopeless and powerless, and they did not understand why their system was declining, which means that because in theory, they still had political power. They still had the ability to elect people, but they were so economically illiterate or dependent upon government that they couldn't actually change or weren't willing to. I'm not sure which. the elected people who were making these decisions.
Well, and I think Rand's point was, I think that she wants you to see all, like eventually when Daphne and when Hank Reardon, who's in control of Reardon Steel, and all these people leave, the book wants you to see them as white knights. But I think that the more interesting parallel is, well, as the middle class or as the working class of individuals, what these elites, this elite sect is doing, blowing up their own mines so that no one can, setting fire to all their oil fields so that no one can use them, and further crippling the economy, because it's a selfish act, because that's what's in their own self-interest. They're not doing the right thing, even though in the book I think it's portrayed as noble, like, yes, I lit all my oil fields on fire and I really flipped off the government there, and now I'm going to disappear to this magical valley with a magical power generator that works somehow, and all the other people can pay for the sins of what they let the government do to us. But and the government is not, I mean, they're the power overreach, they're torturing civilians, they are, really dragging down the whole country, and are at large fault for this recession as well that the country is going through. But yeah, I think the more interesting parallel is you don't have to pick the side of the centralized incompetent government. You also don't have to take the side of this small sect of individuals that is just like, oh yeah, burn it all down and our society will rise from the ashes. The people that truly suffer, as is the case probably today, is the average person, and like you said, is slightly complicit in that they have elected these individuals that have in part helped allow this to happen. And again, that's not something I think I really took away on the first watch, but that also stood out to me as something really concerning.
I felt that too. And I have concern about that, because I almost feel like if there's almost like this prerequisite for this like meritocracy, and then like if you're not a part of that, then you're chopped liver. Like you're like is it the people's fault that they're ignorant, or is it in part due to policies that they've had that have made them ignorant, and they just don't know their own ignorance? Like I have that problem with, like, sometimes in psychiatry, I see somebody going through withdrawal, and I'm like, is that because you were told about that, or are you assuming that what you're like, not just about that, but about a lot of things, free thinking.
I think you can draw a parallel there too, Kurt. I think that's valid.
I have trouble with being so self motivated and like centered that we lose compassion. I feel like compassion is important. So I see that.
So I want to get back to the sign that you took a picture of then, because I feel like this is kind of where that ties in.
This probably is going to result in a story of your childhood, though, Isaac.
That's fine. That's fine. I can deal with it. But yeah, by the third movie, all these people have gone away. There's this power generator, and it uses static electricity, blah, 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 science that doesn't work, to generate infinite power for $0. But in order to go see the magic power generator, you got to say the phrase, you got to say the secret code word, which is, I swear by my life and my love of it that I will never live for another person nor let another person do the same for me.
Yeah. And, I understand why she took this approach. My understanding is that she was an atheist. And I know we're not going to turn this into a religious discussion, although I think there is a part of this that is related to Rand's atheism versus,
I would say that's
a
fair.
Compassion argument. So this is the story of young Isaac. I like to come up with these plans that I think are fantastic, and then my poor wife, does all the work to implement them. This is part of our relationship. But I decided that with my two boys that I wanted to teach them that with money and with wealth, with resources, there are three important things that one should do at a very elementary level. They, of course, should be able to enjoy the fruit of their labor and spend money. they should always be saving and preparing for the future and for emergencies so that they don't have to rely on someone else or because bad things happen. And maybe they can even help somebody else out. And then third, they should use some of their wealth and resources to help others. So, and the helping others was because of my faith, and that, I just believe that because of what, Jesus has done for me, we should also return the favor and love others. That's part of like a response to, to my thankfulness for salvation. But setting that aside, so I came up with this plan that what we would do is, in order to get the boys to do what we wanted them to do, like brush their teeth, put their clothes in the hamper, wipe their butt, things like this, that we would come up with this sticker system, and we would give them a sticker for everything they did. And then at the end of the week, mom would sit down with them and teach them a little math while they added up the stickers, and each sticker was worth 5 cents or whatever it was. And
way below minimum wage.
And so
I needed some government intervention to set some wages for me.
So my wife, of course, carried this out, did all the work, and they did their stickers. They put their stickers on, and then they would have to divide their money up into a third, and a third. A third they got to spend, a third they had to save, and a third they could use to help anyone with anything that they thought was important. And so that's the piece that's kind of missing from this. And I agree with you, Kurt. I think this was her response to compelled compassion. But the reality is that compassion, when it's voluntary, can be a very powerful and also beneficial thing to the individual. And I asked them to divide things up, but as they got older and they got their own money or they got a job or whatever, we started asking them, okay, so, well, how much do you want to save? How much do you want to, it was always, well, you should save at least 10%. You should give at least 10%. And so where I personally in my philosophy deviate from this is that, from her, is that I don't believe anyone should be compelled to be compassionate, except my children, for a brief period of time, just to try to do an object lesson. But that hopefully you would want to be compassionate, and that you would get some non-monetary benefit from that. And I think that maybe, I don't know if it's a frustration or as a teacher, as an economics teacher, where I was often maybe just a little frustrated is the right word, is that people associated capitalism and free enterprise with being not compassionate. And those two things are completely separate, right? We know of business people, you might not even know that they have money because they don't buy nice clothes, they buy used cars, they live in a small house, and they end up being huge philanthropists, right? Because that compassion is important to them. So yeah, capitalism and a lack of compassion, in my mind, are not correlated at all. But in the plot of the movie, and as people think about socialism, and I think especially young people today, they've somehow made this connection that government has to make more decisions in order for compassion to take place. And I just totally disagree with that notion.
Right. I think Ayn Rand communicated that in the book or in the movie, right? Because like the people that are being compelled are like not competent, and they're not altruistic, but they portray themselves as that.
Right. Right.
But,
they want to act like it's like virtue signaling. There's a piece of that, right?
But it's weird because you have like this hyper individualism and this meritocracy, but the people that are capable aren't focused on necessarily the net benefit of everyone. Like they're building their own destinies, and they're so engrossed in that they it's like they don't have time for compassion.
All right, everyone. Isaac Smoldon here. This episode, we'll have a part 2 as we continue our discussion on Atlas Shrugged. So be sure to tune back in 2 weeks from now for the release of that episode.